There was a major upgrade from the ArcGIS API for Python version 2.3 to 2.4, where the WebMap class was removed and the map class added in its place. And this brings about some nuances that make it a bit more difficult to get the layer definition for a layer in a web map compared to what it used to be. Most notably, they removed the get layer function. They've since reinstated it at 2.4.1.1, but it does not return the layer definition like it used to. It returns a feature layer object, which is pretty useless when you're dealing with web maps unless you want to add that feature layer to another web map or maybe duplicate it in the current web map. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through two sort of custom functions that allow you to get that layer definition or get the layer index for a layer in your web map, because most of the methods for the web map content object now rely on that layer index rather than a layer name or a layer object. So these two functions really help out. So let's take a look. Before we get to the code, I just want to show you some of the methods for the map content object related to the map object in the ArcGIS API for Python at version 2.4 and onwards. You can see here, if you want to access a form, you need an index which represents the index of the layer that you want to access the form for. We have the get layer reinstated. It takes in the title of the layer, but it does return a feature layer object and not the layer definition that it used to. Scroll down, you can see layer visibility, you need the index. If you want to move the layers, you need the index. So getting the index of a layer in a web map is important to use these tools. So let's head over to the code. Up top, we are importing the GIS class, which provide access to our ArcGIS Online and content, and also importing the JSON module from the standard Python library. This will just allow us to print the layer definition to screen in a more readable fashion. We first access ArcGIS Online through the GIS class and assign that to a variable called AGOL. From our GIS, which is our ArcGIS Online, we can access the content manager, and we're going to use the get method and supply in a web map item ID, which I will paste in now, and I'll show you my web map in a few moments time. The get method will return what's known as an item object that represents the content item that we are interested in, which happens to be a web map, and we'll assign that item object to a variable called WebMap item. We are interested in a single layer in our web map. I'm going to create a variable called layer name, which is a string that represents that layer name. For me, it is going to be Ireland County Boundaries. Now I want two things. I want to find the index in the web map where that layer sits, and I also want to be able to return that layer definition. First up is the get layer index function. So we've called this get layer index by name, where we supply in an item object that represents a web map and also the layer name that we're interested in. We're going to use list comprehension. So for each layer in our item object get data, the get data is a method of the item object, and when that item is a web map, it returns the JSON definition for that web map as a dictionary. That dictionary has a key called operational layers that contains a list of dictionaries that represent the layer definition for each layer in a web map. Now, if the layer title is equal to layer name, then we're going to return the index from the enumerate function. This comprehension always returns a list, and we're only interested in the first element returned from that list. So if the layer title is found in our map, we'll get the layer index, and if not, none is returned. Next up is the get layer definition function. This also takes in an item object that is a web map and the layer name. Once more, we use list comprehension. So for each layer in our web map item get data, which is the JSON definition, and we're accessing the operational layers once more. So for each layer in our operational layers, if the layer title is equal to our layer name, then return that layer definition. If the name of our layer is found, the layer definition is returned. If not, none is returned. Let's take a look at these functions in action. First up, we're using the get layer index by name. We supply in our webmap item and our layer name, and we'll assign the calling of the get layer index by name function to a variable called layer index, which will return an integer and will print that integer to screen. Next up is the get layer definition, where once more we supply in our webmap item object and then the layer name. We'll assign the calling of the get layer definition to a variable called layer def, which will also print the screen. This will be a dictionary, so we're going to use json.dumps to print that out in a more readable fashion. Before running, I'm going to pop on over to ArcGIS Online and show you my web map. Here we have my web map. There are several layers here, but where does the index start for the layers? Is Ireland Round Towers 0 or is Ireland County Boundaries 0? Well, I'll tell you, it starts at the bottom. Ireland County Boundaries is at index 0 and it increases by 1 as we move up through the list. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now just to note that these indexes here are only for layers that do not participate in a group layer. Let's say Ireland's High Crosses was a group layer, then that is at index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then within that group they have their own indexes starting from the bottom layer in that group. Anyway, we're going to be running the code for Ireland County Boundaries and then we'll do it for Greenways Ireland. So we'll head back over to the code. I'll run the script and make this a bit bigger down here. Scroll to the top. So our county boundaries for Ireland is at index 0. You can see the title there. And we also have the layer definition returned for that layer. Now that definition that you see there is what used to be returned from the get layer method. It is no longer what is returned. You are returned a feature layer object that represents the original feature layer from the feature service. I'll scroll up and just minimize this a little. This time I'm going to go with Greenways Ireland and I'll rerun. Scroll up. You can see here that sits at index 3 and it does have a slightly less of a layer definition because I'm pulling that from a public service rather than sitting on my own ArcGIS Online. Got a bit dark out there since I started recording this video. Anyway, I hope you find those two functions useful. I find them very useful for when I want to just use a layer name to figure out which is the index in that web map, and then I can perform some other workflows down the line. Take care.